Welcome to another episode of the CSA Cooking Adventures. I'm Lorraine Glazar. I've been a CSA member for 15 years, and I know many of you, and maybe some of you know me from the recipes that get put into the newsletter. Today I'm making a salad from this wonderful book called Sioux Chef's Indigenous Kitchen. And I found out about this book because it was featured in a cookbook club that I belong to that is sponsored by the kitchen blog site. So the reasons that I like this cookbook is that this chef, who's a relatively young chef, you can see a picture of him here, he emphasizes working with whole, unprocessed ingredients. And also, he practices a lot of foraging. And that is something that I enjoy too. And you can see here I have this year's crop of olives curing, and you can see the prickly pear jelly that I made out of food that I foraged from 500 yards from my front door. So these are things that attracted me, and this particular recipe is really nice because it's a warm salad. We get a lot of greens in our shares in the winter, and so I like to use them by making salads and eating them, fresh and raw. However, it's not always easy to find a salad that incorporates warm ingredients. So we're gonna make this today, and I'm going to give you some ideas for substitutions because I didn't have everything that the chef mentioned in his recipe list in the form that he mentioned it, and probably you might not either. And being able to cook with what you have and make substitutions on the fly is real important in this day and age. We'll know the pandemic's over when we can go back to the grocery store to get one thing. So I'm going to put the book aside, and I'm going to start by turning on the griddle. And I'm just going to heat the bottom half of it because I don't need the full thing. What I have for my ingredients are some squash. And you can use any variety of squash. If you use it raw, you'll need to cook it a little bit longer. This is already cooked squash, and you see that it's in kind of stubby little matchsticks that are about 1 inch long and about 1/4 inch in diameter. And so that's to ensure that they sprinkle readily over the salad and that they warm up quickly without getting soggy or mushy. I've also got some golden delicious apples from our own Sleeping Frogs farm, and I used a mandolin to cut these, but you could also cut them just with a sharp knife. And these are in somewhat thin rings because I like the ring shape. I did not peel the apples, but if you were cooking for a family that included young children, you could dispense with the circles and you could simply slice them and peel them if that's what your family would prefer. I have some, as the base of the salad, I have some braising greens that we received in our shares recently. And to that, I've added a couple of this mustard variety that's called Golden Frills. And what I did before I came on camera was that I looked through the greens a little bit and I removed any really large stems that would make it difficult to eat. The other ingredients that are called for are cranberries and walnuts. Now I happen to have both of these things because I'm in the midst of getting prepared for the holidays. But if you didn't have these and you wanted to use something that's more indigenous to our part of the world, you could use pomegranate arils and pecans. We're also going to make a quick homemade dressing, and it's as easy as putting the ingredients in a jar and shaking. But I realize that we're living through trying times, so if you want to use a bottled dressing, I would suggest using something with apple cider vinegar as the main acid ingredient, and something that has a sweet and sour flavor profile. Most of the flavor that comes with this salad does come from the ingredients that are used in the dressing, and you'll see as we move along. Okay, so first I'm going to start the apples and the squash on the griddle. First of all, I brushed the squash with a little bit of sunflower oil, which is the preferred oil of choice for this chef, and I had some. But you could use any neutral oil that you have. You don't want a strong flavored oil because, as I mentioned earlier, the flavorings for this salad really come from the dressing. Then I'm going to take the apple rings and I'm going to brush them with a little bit of oil. They're going to sizzle a little bit because I cut them ahead of time and I was soaking them in a little bit of salt water so they wouldn't turn brown. And I'm just going to put those around the outer edges of the griddle. If you were cooking the squash from raw, you would need to cook it 5 to 10 minutes or until it was tender. This happens to be butternut squash, but the original recipe called for delicata squash. And the chef mentions that you can use any squash that you have. And so this is another reason why I chose this, because we get a lot of squash in the winter too. Okay, so then I'm going to shake up the dressing. And I have more sunflower oil in this jar. And the ingredients for the dressing that he calls for are maple vinegar. And this was a very interesting note from the chef that, of course, in his part of the world, which is the Dakotas and Minnesota, there are maple trees. And as they take the sap out of the tree, the sap that comes out at the very end is really thin. And it's too hard to boil it down to make syrup out of it because you have to cook it so long that it doesn't taste good anymore. So they take it and they leave it out to ferment, and it makes a maple vinegar, something which the native peoples who do this call sour sap. And so I don't have any maple vinegar, and I'm really trying not to hoard condiments during the pandemic. So I use some sherry vinegar, although the chef did note you could use apple cider vinegar if you have that. So I'm going to put in the sherry vinegar. I'm going to put in a tablespoon of pure maple syrup. You can see that these are the ingredients that give the dressing its flavor. I'm going to add 2 herbs. The chef calls for a pinch of dry mustard, or you can use a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. So I'm going to use a healthy pinch. There we go. And then the other thing that I'm going to add to the dressing, the recipe calls for sage, and I take that to mean sage leaves. My sage did not survive the 108-degree temperatures over the summer, so I don't have any fresh sage leaves, but I do have some powdered sage, and because it's powdered, I'm going to put it in the dressing instead of into the salad itself. Okay. Grab my jar lid and shake my dressing. If you learn how to do this, you'll find yourself buying bottle dressing less and less. It's not hard, although again, I will understand if you want to make it easy on yourself and use some other type of dressing. Okay, I'm going to go back to the griddle and I'm going to turn the apple slices and the squash over. So they're starting to brown and get warm. And you don't want them to turn into charcoal, but a little charring is where the flavor comes. Turn over this last apple ring, and I'm just going to give them another minute or 2 more on the griddle. So when you're ready to assemble the salad, you're going to need a salad bowl and some large utensils with which you're going to toss your salad. And I'm going to shake this again just to make certain that it's well combined. I'm going to very lightly dress it. And the way I do that is I dip my spoon into the jar and just sprinkle it over the leaves. Generally, in a green salad, the lettuce is the thing that is most important to dress well, but to dress lightly. If you put too much on, you will have a salad that feels greasy and tastes heavy. You can always add more. So I used about half a tablespoon of this dressing for the greenery. And then I'm going to put in my cranberries, and I'm going to toss to distribute them throughout the greens. Then we'll probably pick up enough dressing from the leaves, but if you wanted to add more, you certainly can. Okay, so now I'm plating. I made a partial recipe because I did not want to make the amount indicated for 4 to 6 people. So I did make a smaller amount, but I did make the full amount of the dressing. All right, I think our warm vegetables are ready. So I'm going to lift them off the griddle and put them on the salad. All right. The final step is to add a touch more dressing to drizzle over the warm ingredients. And then to evenly distribute the walnuts. And so here we have a salad of squash, apple rings, and wild greens, which would Seth would have foraged, but we get in our CSA share. And so I urge you to make this, and I hope that you enjoy. Serve it forth.